as well. He was educated at a boarding school in UK, both during the war and 8 years after, following 2 years national service in the army, partly in Sierra Leone. He returned to the UK and took up a career in sales for various companies. In 1968, he started his own business, the Point of Sale Center, and in 1981 opened a subsidiary in Canada where he lived until 2018. He owned a CNC 27 for 5 years, and in 1996 joined MCC, Mimico Cruising Club, with his beloved CNC 35, which he enjoyed for over 20 years. In 1958, in the UK, he was invited to join the Royal Southern Yacht Club in Hamble, near Southampton, and happily crewed for other members, mainly on Scods, South Coast One designs. They were designed by Charles Nicholson, who was a club member. In 1960, he was invited to join the crew of Flicka 2, a pre-war built 12-meter. That year, they had 7 12-meters racing in the Solent. And for those of you who don't know, I had to look it up. A Solent is a narrow stretch of water that lies between southern England, southwest of Portsmouth, and the Isle of Wight. And I actually sailed in that passage when I sailed from England to New York. Late summer, he went on to the West Country to race in Torbay Week. Scepter, which had been defeated by Columbia in 1958, was in the fleet too. After racing in 12s for 2 years, Patrick became interested in the America's Cup and tried to fundraise for a UK challenger. In 2007, he cruised on Silver Sea's Silver Whisper, the only cruise ship with permission to be on the race course in Valencia. Gary Jobson was on board doing a commentary from the bridge. Additionally, he did an analysis of each race afterwards in the theater. Also on board was John Rousmaniere, the official historian of the America's Cup from the New York Yacht Club. We dined with him several evenings and swapped yarns about the 60s. Gary had mentioned that he would be making a video of the America's Cup history, so Patrick asked him to be on the waiting list for it. Happily, a video arrived from Gary at no charge about a year later. And here it is with the unmistakable voice of Walter Cronkite narrating. Patrick O'Brien kindly contacted Gary for permission to show it to Shellbacks today. So Patrick joins us regularly, as you know, and he may answer a few questions after the viewing.
Correct.
So please give Patrick a warm Shellback welcome on, and in absentia, Gary Jobson.
Thank you very much, Diane. This is very difficult to know where to start, but what I want to do with you this evening, my time, but today, is to share my enthusiasm for the America's Cup, because it is the most extraordinary challenge that's, I think, ever been put down. I believe it's the world's oldest sporting trophy. Started in 1851 at the great exhibition in the UK. There was a bunch of people from the New York Yacht Club who built a schooner, a 100-foot schooner called America, to sail across and have a look at the exhibition. And then they heard, when they arrived, they heard that the Royal Yacht Squadron in Towers had offered a 100-guinea cup. 100 guineas was a lot of money, a guinea being £1 and a shilling, so it's 5% more than a pound. 100 guinea cup for a race round the Isle of Wight. And there were quite a few entries. I can't remember how many exactly, but America came in first. And Queen Victoria famously turned to one of her assistants and said, "And who's second?" And the chap said, "There is no second, ma'am." And it's been like that ever since. I think what I'd like to do is to just go very briefly through how the rules have changed over the years and how the courses have changed before we actually get to see Gary's video. So it all started in 1851. In 1857, the syndicate who had built the yacht American, they donated the cup to the New York Yacht Club to be sailed one boat against one on one. And there were challengers from all over different parts of Europe. There were challengers from Canada, I think from Royal Canadian Yacht Club. They challenged in 1876. But the extraordinary thing is that the New York Yacht Club, or the America's Cup, was retained by them for 132 years after 1851. Let's go back to the rules for a minute. Until 1995, it was the best 4 out of 7, or the first one to get to 4. And this is what I used to sail in 1960. We went way offshore, so no spectators, which is not like today, but anyway, no spectators. We sailed a triangular course. So you've got 3 totally different legs. And they were 4 miles each. You did it, there were 6 legs. So you sailed 24 miles. And an interesting point is that in 1956, which isn't all that long ago to me, that the Challenger no longer had to sail on their own bottom over to America. So that gave the Americans an enormous advantage. If you wanted to be a challenger, you've got to cross the Atlantic, you've got to build a pretty tough boat. So they had a big advantage there. They could build lighter boats. And that's perhaps why they went on for 132 years unchallenged, unbeaten. Just as Diane just mentioned that Ted Turner won the America's Cup in '77, and he beat Australia 4-0, and he had Gary Jobson as his tactician. And Gary told me that he could never get Ted to tack when he wanted him to. And he said, Ted, look over there. There's a bunch of pretty girls on the shore. Go for it. Go for them. Until 2007, it was always the best 5 out of 9 races. The first defense of the America's Cup was in 1870. That's nearly 20 years after they won it. And they were challenged 24 times and won 24 times. It wasn't until 1983 when Alan Bond came over with his Australia, which was a 12-meter, and he won. I haven't got the figures in front of me, but he won and he lost to Freedom. And Freedom then was sailed by Dennis Conner. And the story was in the New York Yacht Club, they had a rule, because they'd had this magnificent trophy in their cabinet for 132 years, that whoever lost it, their head would be in the trophy. So Dennis Conner was pretty motivated to win the next challenge, which he did. And he regained it in San Diego in 1987. And in 12 meters again, we're talking about. These boats, by the way, they aren't 12 meters long. They're 65 feet long. The 12 meter is an incredibly complicated formula that takes in sails, waterline length, overall length, everything else, and it ends up at 12. And there are very few people who know how that formula works. So in 1988 was the next challenge, and that was a very, very controversial one that ended up in court. And US had a 60-foot long catamaran, and New Zealand arrived in their challenge as a 132-foot monohull. Personally, I just love monohulls, and I think there should still be monohulls today in the America's Cup, but that's my opinion. Although those new catamarans are pretty exciting. In fact, they can do 50 knots in 15 knots of wind. It's extraordinary. After that, they came out with a new rule for the International America's Cup competition, IACC, and these were 75-foot boats, monohulls, and I saw them in Valencia, and I actually sailed on the French boat too in Southampton. And they were faster, they're much faster, they're very light, but very wet. I can remember New Zealand had to have buckets bailing water out of theirs all the time. But they were very fast. They then had to do 8 legs of a 22.6 mile course. And at this, I think that's when they started doing the north-south or windward-leeward course instead of the triangular one, which is more or less what they use today. In 1995, there was a 6-leg course won by New Zealand, and that was sailed by Russell Coutts, many of you have heard of him, won by New Zealand's Black Magic. And that was America's only second loss since 1851. That's 1851 to 1995. And then in 2000, New Zealand won. They beat Luna Rosso from Italy. In 2003, they had a third victory against the Swiss, Alinghi. And of course, in those days, they had started all the Louis Vuitton preliminaries, all the trials with different countries were raced off against each other to choose a defender, or a challenger, sorry. So in 2007, it went to Valencia, and I thought it'd be rather nice to go there and watch it. So we booked up on Silversea, and they have small cruise ships, and we were the only cruise ship allowed on the race course. And it started off overlooking, we were right on the edge of the village and the harbour there, overlooking all the boats. And then after the first night, they moved us off. We were facing a lumber yard, which wasn't quite so good. But on the race course, as Diane has already mentioned, Gary Jobson did a resume every evening in the theatre there of the race, and that was when the Swiss beat New Zealand 5-2. Alinghi won that one. 2010, the US, they won after there was a court battle. It all got rather nasty, and people complaining about the rules, the boats, and everything else. So then they decided to change the rules yet again, and they came out with a 72-foot catamaran, which is what they have today. And it was the best of 17 races. And I think that's probably because they whiz around the course so fast that you can't just have the best of 4 or the best of 7. It doesn't give them a chance. In 2013, I remember watching this, and probably many of you did. New Zealand was leading US by 8-1, and it was the best of 17. So they needed one more win. America, amazingly, this was when it was financed by Larry Ellison of Oracle. America won the next 8 races, and they won the next 9 races, and they won the competition. Today, I think it leaves a very bad taste in my mouth because New Zealand, on their last race, when they're 8 up already, America have won. New Zealand, coming towards the finish, they were well ahead, and about 30 seconds away from the line, and the officials stopped the race. They said, you've overrun. They've overrun on time. And that it's just very hard to believe what they did. And then America came on to win the next 8 races, so they won 9-8. So that takes us almost up to today. Incidentally, it was very interesting meeting Gary Jobson. He told me that he was going to make a video, and he'd been doing it for a few years, and he wanted to add on the 2007 races in Valencia. This is why he kind of stopped it for a while. But he said when he got back to do the 2007 Valencia, Walter Cronkite had aged quite a lot, and he was speaking a lot slower. So they had to speed up his voice, technically, so that it sounded like it flowed the same all the way through the video, which you'll see, listen to. There are lots more things I want to talk about, but well, 2 things actually. I've always had a love of J boats. I think they're the epitome of America's Cup racing. Many of you know what I mean, the J class.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were about 100 feet, 120 feet. I was on a 12 meter, which is only 65 feet. No lifelines or anything, it's quite easy to fall off. But the J's were magnificent. And probably the most beautiful one of ever is Endeavour. It was built, designed by Charles Nicholson and built for Tommy Sopwith, who did Sopwith Pup and Camel, the aeroplanes for the First World War. And the J boats lasted roughly from 1920 to 37. And there's something else that Diane mentioned in my bio. That is, this is way back, I'm going back to 1960 now. I thought of a way how we could rustle up some money for a British challenge, for another British challenge, because Scepter challenged in 58 and was beaten by Columbia. And then Tony Boyden, who was my skipper, on Flickr, he built a new boat called Sovereign that I wasn't invited to crew on. I guess I couldn't do the coffee grinder quick enough or whatever. But he was the last British challenge before Ben Ainsley. But I thought of a way of fundraising whereby we would teach or encourage Americans who are coffee drinkers to encourage them to drink tea. And I had all the visuals done for a packet of tea with America's Cup written across it. And the tea would be a cup of America's cup of tea. And each packet would have a little card in it, like cigarettes used to do before the war. And you'll have an album and stick various challengers and defenders and so on into the album. And we thought about having Henry VIII's tea bags. And I even went as far as Catherine's Char and Anne of Leaves. That was 2 of his wives. However, the tea companies didn't take it up. They didn't really understand what it was all about, because in those days, when I was trying to pitch to the brand companies, it was not a spectator sport at all. So they didn't get it. But now it's very much a spectator sport. I love the fast boats, but I'm a purist, and I like the J's and the 12s, were just magnificent. So, Graham, if you're ready.
Yep. Okay. First people to have their hand up is Spence. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Will this be available for viewing in the future?
No. Unfortunately, no. We purposely did not record it because I could, the dispatch is in my drawer here. I could hold it up and show it to you. It is copyright of ESPN, and it was a very special dispensation from Gary Jobson that he let us, when I sent him an email and explained what Shellbacks was and so on, and he just sent one line back saying, "I hope your friends enjoy it." And I wouldn't like to upset that bond between us, you know.
For sure. It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
It's very well done, wasn't it? Yeah.
It is.
And those J boats are just so beautiful.
They're all fantastic looking boats.
I was in Cowes actually about 3-4 years ago, and I'd read that they were going to be down there, and so I jumped on a train and got the hovercraft across to Cowes. And as I'm arriving there, Endeavour, Velshida, and I think the new American Ranger, they were just coming around the corner past the Royal Yacht Squadron with their rather dark sails. And it's a wonderful, wonderful sight.
I can't imagine seeing that. What I found astounding was the ease with which the mast broke and the sails ripped up and the
the boat breaking in half.
Yeah, yeah.
The AI, the 1ACC, International Americans Cup design. They were really like a canoe. I mean, they were just a shell. I went in the French one, and that's why they were very, very wet.
Yes, for sure. Noel, you're next. Unmute yourself.
Yep, I found the button. In 1998, when we were bringing the boat back from Newfoundland, we were anchored in Newport Harbor with Shamrock and Endeavour right behind us.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we didn't look very big.
No.
She didn't look very big.
Pardon?
She didn't look very big?
No, we didn't look very big.
I'm sure.
They could have carried us on deck.
When I joined the Royal Southern in 1958, in the Hamble River, there were a lot of mud berths. Today, a lot of them have been scooped out, of course, in their marinas, but there were mud berths and swinging moorings. And in 2 of the mud berths, we had Endeavour in one of them and Velshida in another one, up by Moody's yard. And we used to take a dinghy over and go over Endeavour. And I remember going down below, the companionway was open. We went down this huge oak staircase, and the first door I opened had a bath in it. I couldn't believe it had a full-size bath in a racing yacht. Yeah. But they spent a lot of money renovating them.
Yes.
And now I think altogether there are probably six or seven J boats around.
Yep.
Okay. Next up is Gordon Martin. Go ahead. Unmute yourself.
Gordon.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. Thank you very much, Patrick. That was wonderful. I met Gary Jobson at some sort of presentation in Oakville a few years back. I don't remember, but a very easygoing guy to talk with.
Yeah.
The other thing is one of the biggest thrills of my life is I went on the replica of the America down in Florida.
Oh.
It was a replica above waterline and modern below. And I told the helmsman, I was a keelboat skipper, and he said, take over. And he let me steer it for a while. It was phenomenal. 14 knots and a little breeze, you know.
Wow.
Absolutely amazing.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Okay. Next up is Julia. Go ahead.
Thank you, Patrick. That was fantastic. My memories go back as far as probably the 1960s, and I've watched it ever since. Does it still exist? First question. What is a mud berth, and what were the costs of each of these vehicles? Millions or? And the year that Fraser came out to see us was when the Perth race was on. He dropped in unexpectedly the first time to our little Goolwa house on his way, and he went out in a boat in the flotilla around, watching it for hours. And most of the people had never been out on the sea before in the little boat that was bobbing up and down. You know the result. Anyway, just what are mud berths and what was the cost?
Well, a mud berth, I think it's partly man-made, but it's actually more or less made by the hull. It has to be in tidal waters, and in the Solent you get two tides a day, semi-diurnal. There are 2 lows and 2 highs in 24 hours, and these boats used to kind of push their way down into the mud as the tide dropped, and then they'd stick there. And then they come up again and float when the water came back. And I think maybe at very, very on the very low tides, they might possibly have scooped them out a bit, but I think they're more or less made by the hull.
That's a good idea.
And there are probably still 1 or 2 of them there, I don't know, but it only works in tidal waters.
And the cost?
Cost of what, a berth or a boat?
Good question. The boats, I mean, I guess they're millions of dollars and hours of work, design work and all the rest of it.
Well, you heard one, he said they used to start at 500. He got five of his best friends to put in 100,000. But even, I think in the 20s and 30s, the J boats must have run into 3, 4, 5 million pounds in way back.
6 million.
Today, I mean, Larry Ellison with Oracle, I mean, he spends billions on the thing.
Right. That's what I thought. Thank you.
It's all the support and the crew and, you know.
Yeah. And flying out to places. And
exactly.
And so how much does it cost to be on one of them as a participant? I mean, you'd have to cover some of your cost.
I don't know. It's normal for the skipper to pay all your expenses, but maybe these, even though they're professional crews, maybe they do, chip in a bit. I really don't know.
Chip in a bit.
It's something we've got to Google. We'll have to Google it.
I'll Google. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Okay, next up, George Hume, go ahead.
Thank you. I had the good fortune to be in Auckland in 2000 when the America's Cup was on. I didn't have the good fortune to be a spectator out on the water, and the competitive boats were berthed too far away to see very much about them. But what was wonderful was to be among the visitors, the people who come to those races and bring their boats, a 200-foot sailboat or a 150-foot sailboat. I remember there was one particular boat near where we were standing, and I'm sure that the the metal mast was 3 feet in diameter.
Yeah.
And one of the jack tars was on a rope waxing the mast in order that it be in perfect shape in case the owner ever came to stay on the yacht while it was there. There must have been 30 or 40 visiting yachts that had been sailed over or motored over to New Zealand just to watch the Cup.
I mean, there are some massive boats around, like Hyperion and Athena, and what's the one with it's got 2 or 3 masts, and it's all automatic. I forget the name of it now.
I think it's the Maltese Falcon.
Yeah, that's the one I want. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, he doesn't have to pay for many crew, that fellow.
Okay, next up is Liz Lai. Do you go ahead, unmute yourself?
See.
You're not unmuted. Oh, now you are.
Yes.
Who was it?
I was astounded at the whole production. Thank you so much, Patrick, for bringing it to us.
You're very welcome.
I also was absolutely amazed at the amount of canvas on the earlier boats.
Oh my God, yes.
I just couldn't believe it. And I assume the hulls were much heavier in order to carry that amount of canvas.
Yeah, there's one, the Challenger, I've got a list of them here from, if anybody's interested, by the way, Diane, I can send you 2 links, the history of the America's Cup, and also a list of all the defenders and challengers. And
that would be great. Do that, and I will send it out with my next missive.
Okay. What I can tell you, in 1870, the yacht Cambria, who challenged from the Royal Thames Yacht Club, she's still alive and fit.
Oh my heavens.
She's still around, which is absolutely massive. Yeah.
Okay, next up is Hank. Hank, go ahead on mute yourself, ask your question.
Yeah, I'm already muted. Well, the previous question already, I was also impressed by the gigantic amount of sail of the early boats. And so high the masts were, but none of the pictures showed a broken mast. And I'm just wondering, what was the highest wind force they could sail in? Because I cannot see that they could sail in stronger winds than the present day American Cup.
You're absolutely right. When I raced on 12 meters, I think it had to be under 20 knots for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was probably somewhere around 18. I think we wouldn't go out because we were quite a good crew, but we were not that experienced, and it wasn't very good for the boat either. And I think that goes for all the races ever since 1870 or whatever. That they are weather dependent.
Thank you. I think it was in 85, the Susan Hood, when we had that hurricane hit Barry. There was the Susan Hood race.
Oh, okay.
Only 6 of the 13 IOR1 class boats finished the race. And I was on that night as well. And I think we did not put up the spinnakers, thank goodness. We're just on white. But the tactician took over the helm, and he was like born on a sailboat, and he could get it sometimes on one of those waves, and he had hit 15 knots, 14 knots. That is on a boat which hull speed is around 7. It was a CNC 34 I was on.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I had a 35 actually.
Yeah. It was a scary night. We all had to have a safety harness and locked, you know, there's a safety.
Incidentally, the 79 Fastnet, which I've meant to mention, I just bought a new book on it by John Rumenair, who is the New York Yacht Club historian. And he was on a boat called Toscana, and Gary Jobson was on Ted Turner's boat, Tenacious. They were both in the 79 Fastnet. And one of them, I guess it was Tenacious because she won, she got around the Fastnet Rock before the storm really, really got bad. And they all went down below and had a state dinner.
Yeah, I recall that race too. I've had a talk by Don Green, who was with Evergreen in that race.
Yes, yeah.
And
I listened to that.
Scary. I mean, it really, it's the way he was talking. It is, yeah, it was like you were almost on the boat. You could feel the tension of every minute there was another wave. And it was really for hours, are we going to make the next wave?
Okay. Thank you, because there's a couple more questions.
Oh my God.
Seamus, go ahead.
Well, good afternoon, Patrick, or good night where you are in the UK. I enjoyed that immensely, and I haven't sailed for many years, but I was wonderful to hear Walter Cronkite's voice and the way he described not alone the people, but the skills, everything that's involved. And he brought back a lot of good memories from following him over the years. And I noticed how he has a great understanding of whatever it is he covered. He's gone on, unfortunately.
He did it. Yeah, he did it with quiet enthusiasm, I'd say.
Thank you. You're so eloquent. And the other thing was that my late mother, who lived in England before she got married, she used to ask me once when I was a young boy. She said, "Son, what comes out of cows with a plop?" And I said, "Mother, I damned if I know." And she said, "The Duke of Edinburgh's yacht." Cows is the place in the Isle of Wight, right?
That's right.
Yeah, I grew up on a farm, so that may sound a bit vulgar. I'm sorry.
No, he had a dragon called Blue Bottle.
That's right, yeah. And the other thing was that you mentioned something. I used to be very interested in photography, and the name rang a bell. I think it was the Rosenfelds were the America's Cup photographers for almost a century, right?
They were, yeah. Right.
Are they still around?
That I don't know, but Beacon in England is still around.
Okay. Well,
and
again,
I have a photograph that I showed at a Moose Milk once, many years ago, of the Flicker 2, the 12 meter that I was on.
Yeah. And I noticed that no matter what sport, whether it's tennis or lawn bowling or sailing or show jumping or horse racing, there are always discussions and there are always arguments. And I was quite amused that some of the arguments ended up in court, which of course would provide further interest. And but again, at the end of the day, everybody moves on, and that was great. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so our last call for any questions before I turn it back to Diane to wrap up the meeting.
Okay. Thank you very much, Patrick. That was wonderful that Gary agreed to share that with us and that you were able to put it up with Graham. I would love to have Gary Jobson's address if you have some way of connecting with him, because I'd like to send both you and him a token of our appreciation for allowing this video to be shown at Shellback. So if you have that information, I've got your address, but I don't have his. If you can get it, that would be terrific. Just send it to me.
I have his email address, so I'll send you.
Okay, that would be great. Maybe we can send him a certificate if we can't send a pin. I would really like to send a pin though. So that's fantastic. Thank you, Victor, for that. And Patrick, again, thank you for your insight and your experience with the America's Cup and for getting that video for us.